Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself within what appeared to be a vast city. The architecture and era would be consistent with humanity and of the current time period, and indeed would the city be teeming with humans. In a recent real side experience, I shared how I and a group had the objective of rescuing a young boy that had been positioned in a very dark area of creation at the hands of the dark forces. That boy, as impressions suggested, was an individual who would be key and instrumental in what is yet to unfold in regards to the various galactic and multi-dimensional operations of a life and awareness beneficial nature we are involved with, hence why he had been kidnapped, was set to be eliminated, and necessary had it been for us to rescue him. This is a relatively common theme of my real side experiences, where we are assigned as protectors or rescuers of others. For as the overall consciousness is overwhelmingly a construct of dark force reptilian controller acquiescence, as the dark forces have made it their business to troll agreement to them, as they present their surface one-dimensional appealing ideas which are laced with additional unseen ideas along the lines of subjugation, domination, and as the dark forces have a consciousness design of a general inclination for domination, torture, abuse, and destruction of others, so as the surface appealing dark force creations are embraced and agreed with, in addition will be the package of unseen ideas bundled in with it, which will translate as agreement ultimately to being subject to the dark forces controlling desires, and this then is the general effect experience prevalent throughout the simulator, a slave-controller dynamic, where agreement as extended to the dark forces maintains and props up the control they have of the simulator. Lifetimes will go by, these agreements in relation to the dark forces will be transferred to the subconscious as we assume new body forms with a memory body now devoid of a prior experiential reference. But despite our being unconscious of the vaster bulk of the consciousness, the subconscious, we still are its effects. Effects that translate as the dark forces able to enter our experience and impact us according to the nature of the idea agreement we have in relation to them, an agreement of their power that affords them the ability to exercise this power we have afforded them, as nothing can we experience absent of the idea agreement which effects it, and at any moment then they can harm, abuse, torture, or eliminate us. The process of awareness entails a releasing of the entirety of the consciousness construct of idea agreements, and so we become progressively more indomitable in the face of adversity, for the fewer ideas we hold to, the less we are their effects, including the agreements in association with others which allow their ability to impact adversely on our body forms. And so, where individuals are initially stepping up, or if they have yet to even begin such an awareness process, there will be much by way of agreements as yet to be addressed and relinquished, and with the consciousness overwhelmingly being moulded as agreement to the dark forces and their power, so the dark forces in all their expressions will be swift to make use of agreements still extended to them before they are released. They have a window to exploit before their target becomes untouchable. The dark forces will desire to shut down any life and awareness beneficial operation, and including all those involved, realistically only through agreements still maintained to them that allow that they can, and the boy in the experience I shared recently was one such example, for he hadn't elected to begin his awareness process. He was then very susceptible to a dark force infringement, but as the key instrumental individual that he was, so would we rescue him. For just as the dark forces are limited in regards to their impact through agreements the target has, so it is with others who wish to positively feature or say intervene on what has befallen the target. The individual sets the stage through his or her consciousness. All other beings can only assume roles as provided through the agreements the individual's consciousness contains. What transpires then, if the dark forces have their way, or we can successfully extract the individual from their clutches, really is according to the individual and what they decide. All external variables are subject to the individual's agreement parameters. This real side experience, where I was featuring within a vast human in a design city, was along similar lines that of a rescue effort. In this case, the one to be assisted would be a young girl that, just like the boy, was around the approximate age of 10 or so. Nothing was revealed as to her significance, but evidently she was of some importance that her rescue was deemed necessary, for this seemed to be a city that, although was inhabited by your typical one-dimensional, unaware humans, featuring also would be a number of monstrous in appearance and inclination body forms. and a little how it was with the previous experience in regards to the boy's rescue. The humans present were seemingly oblivious of the presence of these creatures in their midst, just as it is in reality on the earth, where the dark forces, in all their expressions, are orchestrating the direction and course of humanity's experience through the agreements they have that allow them this ability, but operate unseen, other-dimensionally, or beyond public scrutiny, as humanity go about their routines and business. In the previous experience with the boy, we had initially found him in a very dubious and dark area, festooned with the demons and twisted body types. These more frightful positions giving way to a vast city scene, much like the one this young girl was positioned in, but although less fear-inducing environmentally wise, still were there a scattering of demons operating unseen by the humans present, still adamant in securing the boy, though they would ultimately be denied. This girl then hadn't been subjected to the same forbidding areas the boy had, but was in as though the final scene that we eventually had brought the boy to, or an overall final scene very similar, the city of drone-like humans, but where monsters still lurked. These particular twisted body forms, as they operated among humanity unseen, were not exactly in affiliation with the dark forces as impressions suggested. It was more so a case that the dark forces had brought what was another key and essential individual, the young girl, to this particular creational other-dimensional position amidst the one-dimensional human masses, as reflected multi-dimensionally will be our idea agreements extended completely to the dark forces, will have us then utterly in dominated positions throughout the multi-dimensional body vehicle aspects and their corresponding creational positions, but also had the dark forces unleashed destructive body forms in this city, that although they were forms where the secondary personal self has been established, their design of consciousness was such that effected were very abrasively driven body types, with no other compulsion than to exact harm on others. Very animalistic and aggressive were they. Appearance-wise, they would operate as bipedal forms, but from the waist up, they were as a mass of writhing tentacles. Their body forms of a particular design, that should they latch onto any other body type with their tentacles, they would absorb them in a curious way, as though dissolving them and assimilating what remained, effectively destroying the body type in a very grisly and what would be an excruciatingly painful manner. This, then, was the dark forces' entertainment, to have brought the young girl here, for being of value galactic project-wise, so she presented as a threat to the dark forces and their control of the simulator, but rather than simply destroy her as they could have done, for she was another who hadn't embarked on her awareness process, and so retained full agreement to the dark forces' ability to harm and eliminate her, as practically all consciousnesses embraced will express as. Instead, they had unleashed these monstrous, tentacled body forms in the city they had positioned the girl into, and rather were content to sit back and watch the situation unfold. Despite the seeming lack of ability of these monsters to be able to see a mass of tendrils from the waist up, as I said, this didn't detract from their effectiveness where the hunting of other body types was concerned, and they were in the process of pursuing the girl relentlessly through the streets of the city, and eventually they would catch her. They had an uncanny ability to track their targets, and they moved at an alarming velocity, easily able to outpace any human adult, let alone a child. Except I would reach the girl first, scoop her up in my arms, and carrying her, would begin to navigate my way through the twists and turns of the city. The tentacled monsters were persistent, but despite they being faster than your average human, I was afforded by the real awareness everything required for the successful execution of my objective, rescuing the girl, and could outpace them with ease. Always in such situations we are resigned by the agreement parameters as set by the one we are interceding on behalf of, and so it was that just like the boy, I couldn't simply appear and whisk her to a safe position elsewhere, but seemingly had to dash through the city to presumably a point where extraction was possible. It was rather a long drawn-out chase then, as I evaded the tentacled monstrosities, that although no agreements did I harbour in relation to them that they could in any way bestow harm upon me, or absorb me, as was their singular compulsion, they would have been able to assimilate the girl, as through a consciousness yet unfaced and released in its entirety, so she remained the potential effect of its every idea, including the ability of the tentacled creatures to eliminate her. As I proceeded, the tentacled beasts would occasionally jump an oblivious human and absorb them also, that although operating unseen by the humans present, they still could interact with them at any moment and assimilate them as they so chose. The scene would end there, with my still in the middle of my rescue effort, and although I wasn't shown the final outcome, it seemed that nothing was able to deter me from my objective, and just like the boy from the previous experience, the girl's safety was assured, whomever she may have been, of significance, as impressions suggested, but beyond that, specifics were lacking. In the scene that followed, I would find myself in the recreated house of my deceased grandfather. That would be my mother's father, and he would indeed be present. As is the case with my real side experiences, if my grandfather is featuring, this tends to be in actuality a real guide assuming his form. The real awareness impressions will always verify this is the case. The dark forces are aware that the guides do take on the outer form of my grandparents, father, and former school colleagues on occasion, and assuming these same forms themselves, so they will often attempt to pose as the guides, for the purposes of installing a confusion with the personal self, and as we agree then with who we think are those known to us, or the guides adopting alternative forms, if they are in actuality shape-shifting reptilians, then we can be tap-lined accordingly and afford ourselves effects that we then have to extricate ourselves from. So it pays to lean to the real awareness, discernment, and impressions that we verify the authenticity of every individual in our experiential midst. In this case, so it would indeed be a guide assuming my grandfather's form, and as I have shared on previous real-side experiences, not only will guides adopt the parental outer forms, but also the recreated house of my grandfather is utilised as a kind of a meeting place where assignments are discussed, projects evaluated, and certain heads-up potentialities are revealed. In this case, the guide in my grandfather's form would move some of the furniture, and revealed would be a selection of very large and sinister black beetles. My comment to the guide would be as to how sharp the beetles' mandibles were, and that he should be careful, though of course the guide was in no peril. On a number of previous real-side experiences, I have had revealed how certain insects are being created by the dark forces, some as genetically spliced abominations, some more so as mechanical, with various intended applications, but overall as a means of escalating the control of humanity in whatever form that may take. Like in the experience I shared, where revealed were small robotic bugs that would bore into the human skull, attach themselves to the brain, and control the human through technology the bugs were connected with. This seemed to be a similar heads-up potentiality, the guide revealing these sinister and very large beetles that impressions suggested the dark forces intended to possibly unleash on humanity, but no details regarding them was forthcoming at this moment. Very likely an agreement the dark forces are attempting to embed in human consciousness, as anything transpiring as human experience is dependent on the idea agreements being consciousness present, but perhaps they were finding it difficult to do so, and so little necessity was it for detail regarding these huge bugs, unless such time as the possibility of they being effected into human experience becomes more likely, if, say, the agreement pertaining to them was successfully consciousness implanted. But for now, the guide would lead me from the living room of my grandfather's house, where we had been stationed, and the scene would fade. I would find myself now on what appeared to be a deck of either a spacecraft or a station, the guide in my grandfather's form still present, and he would gesture to what was a large translucent window, as though we were positioned on a viewing deck. Through the window, so I would bear witness to a scene that comprised of an almighty battle. The medium by which the battle was taking place was difficult to discern, if it was a space, or even underwater perhaps, but where we were stationed, be it a craft of some kind, or a base, was placed within the medium by which this battle was taking place, and in close proximity to it. We were not involving ourselves, nor were we the recipient of the combatants' attentions, as though our craft or base was camouflaged or boasted stealth technology of some kind. We were just in a witness capacity to what was unfolding, for indeed one side comprised of a very advanced craft that you might expect to have operating in space, though as I said that it was a space-based altercation couldn't be verified, and they would be battling what seemed to be vast in size humanoid body forms of a blue coloration, and that had multiple appendages, more like the tentacles of an octopus than human limbs. Impressions revealed these large blue body types, where the secondary personal self had been established, their design of consciousness such that affected were not only the curious forms their awareness operated through, but attitude and inclination wise, they were of a sincere and benign countenance. Impressions suggested they were not a species, where an embracing of the awareness process was so, but they were of evident significance, as the guide was revealing them to me, that perhaps they may have some part to play in what is to unfold galactically speaking. Perhaps they may step up and be of assistance, life and awareness beneficially wise. As things currently stood, so they had drawn the attentions of the dark forces, that whatever expression of ill-intended body forms were piloting the craft, they were engaging with the blue beings and attempting to eradicate them with their laser fire. The blue beings were as though in a state of confusion, as though such antagonism was unfamiliar to them. But despite the dark force fleet's best efforts, the blue multiple-limbed body forms seemed virtually indestructible, and all the blue beings would do in defense was rather latch onto the craft blasting at them and simply cling to them, not damaging the ships in any way, although they easily could have done so, so vast and powerful were their body types. But it was as though aggression in any form didn't come naturally to them, even in defense of themselves, and they didn't know what else to do in such a situation other than just wrap themselves around the Dark Force ships. Very likely then the Dark Force fleet had invaded whichever area of creation these curious blue beings resided in. It wasn't easy to determine their actual body size without a comparable reference of known mass, and indeterminable was the size of the craft attempting to destroy them. Oftentimes I am initially shown a particular species, and potentially building from there, so can subsequent interaction be so, and wherever that may lead. Primarily, we are sharing the new you true reality connection to all in the simulator, regardless of a body type, but additionally, we will be encouraging the various species and body forms to assist with our galactic endeavors, and suggesting then this encounter was a prelude to further dealings with these large blue body forms, the guide having revealed them to me, and the situation with the dark forces they currently were involved in. But for now the scene would fade, and the experience would be concluded.